In this video, we're going to take a look at what we call factoring trinomials. If you recall from previous discussion, factoring is rewriting an expression in terms of multiplication. So last time around, we were bringing out a greatest common factor, and today we're going to break down a trinomial, which the prefix of that word just means that we're going to start with three terms and we're going to write it as two binomial factors using a process that we call splitting the middle, meaning we're going to break up a middle piece into two parts. So we have a process for that. It's fairly simple. It's very repetitive. Once you get it down, you get to keep doing the same thing over and over again and getting consistent results. So let's take a look here. The steps to solving, write your terms in order. We mean by exponent there. So when you look at this first case, we have x to the second, and then we have x to the first, and then we have a constant term without an x. So we have that in descending order from largest exponent down to the lowest. And then we want to identify the values of a, b, and c. In this polynomial, we have x squared as the leading term that we could put a 1 as our first term in there. And we have 1x squared plus 7x plus 12. And when we look at this, we're looking at these coefficients, these numerical values, a, b, and c, just being the first coefficients in order. So a in this case, we would say is 1, b is positive 7, we see that with plus, c is positive 12. And so we identified the a, the b, and the c. And the reason for that is it's going to help us factor this trinomial, which we do by breaking up from three terms into four, as we see below. And in this next line down, where we have four terms, you notice instead of writing the 7x, we've broken it into pieces of 3x and 4x. But the question is, why did we choose these two numbers instead of two others? Why didn't we use 2 and 5, for example, or 1 and 6? And the reason for that is based on our other values of a and c. We have to have two very specific numbers that we use during this process in order to get the result that's needed here. So we have an X chart to the side that we have used before. In this chart, we fill in a couple parts. The parts in blue are what we start with. So I'm actually going to hide the other two parts here. And to fill in these two parts, we ask ourselves at the top, what is A times C? What do we get when we multiply the value of A times the value of C? In this case, what is 1 times 12? And in this first scenario, 1 times 12 would give us a positive 12. Below in this chart, we have the value of B, and B in this scenario is positive 7. So what we need to do is we need to find these other two numbers that go on the sides. And to get those, we need to find some numbers that multiply to 12. So if you take a look here, when we think of numbers that multiply to 12, we have a few options. Let's think about it. With 12, maybe we have the numbers 1 and 12. Those multiply to 12, but we do have another case of 2 and 6 and 3 and 4. And when we look at these three sets, we know that all three of these options multiply to this top number of 12. But only one of these three options also adds to this bottom number of 7. And that's how we decide that out of all these options that multiply to 12, we're going to use the options of 3 and 4. Those two numbers are the only ones that do both, multiply to 12, as well as adding to this bottom value of 7. Okay, and so once we decide that, what we do is we go back to the beginning where we had this plus 7x, and we go through split the middle. In other words, we're taking the middle number and breaking it in to those two numbers that we just established. We had a 3x and a 4x here from this chart where we decided we're going to use 3 and 4. Notice we kept the x that was with the 7. It goes to both terms, so that 3x and 4x would combine back to the beginning. All right, once you get to those four terms, we go through a process called grouping, which we've seen before. We did it without this splitting the middle. That's the new idea today. But once you get to four terms, we talked about what can we bring away from each part. When we look at just the first two terms, what could we divide them by? And we notice that they both have an x. So down below, we see that we are bringing an x away from each half. And when we bring the x away, we ask ourselves, what happens when I take an x away from this first term? X squared divided by x, that's just x, and 3x divided by x is 3. And then we go to the second half and repeat that process. We ask ourselves, what can we divide by? What can we divide a 4 and a 12 by? And that would be a value of 4, which we bring to the front. And when you divide, 4x divided by 4 is x, and 12 divided by 4 is 3. And when we factored by grouping, we saw that these two groups matched each other. And so the first group here is x plus 3. And the second group, recall, is what you brought out from each half. So the second factor is formed by bringing this common factor from the first half and the common factor from the second half together. And that's what we're looking for today. We want to get these two sets of parentheses. All right, so here's what we've got, and that's what we're going to practice. And this was a case where everything was nice and positive. So we're going to go through these exact same steps a few more times, looking at a few different cases where there's a negative involved in some different places. So let's go through step by step again. In this first case, we have 1x squared minus 10x plus 16. And so we see the values of a, b, and c again, where a is a positive 1, b is a negative 10, and c is this last value of positive 16. All right, and then we go through again. So at the beginning, to fill in our chart, we start at the top. We take a times c. And a times c in this case, we take our a value, that is 1. Then we take our c value, that is 16. And 1 times 16 is 16. And then we have the bottom value for b, which we just take that value and write it in. So that is a negative 10. All right, so we have b is negative 10 at the bottom. We have a times c at the top. That gave us 16. And so here we go again. We want to find some numbers that multiply to 16. We have options. Let's list them out. 16 could be formed by multiplying 1 and 16, or 2 and 8, or let's see, 4 and 4. Now, all of these, we need to multiply to positive 16 and add to a negative 10. And the only way to multiply to a positive 16 is either these two numbers are both positives or they are both negative numbers. Since the bottom number is negative, I'm going to use two negative numbers. So I'm going to think through, do I want a negative 1 and a negative 16, a negative 2 and a negative 8, or a negative 4 and a negative 4? Since we want the numbers to add to negative 10, I'm looking at this middle group here where we have a negative 2 and a negative 8. Those are the two numbers I want to use because they fit both qualifications. They multiply to the positive 16 and add to the negative 10. All we do afterwards is we go back to the original problem where we have x squared minus 10x plus 16, and we split the middle. So splitting the middle, you keep the original first and last term, but we break up the middle term, hence the name, split the middle. And we break this into two parts. And those two parts are what we have in our chart over here. It's the two numbers we found on the left and the right. So we said we were going to use the numbers negative 2 and negative 8. Now recall, with these, we keep the variable of the middle term. So the negative 10 had an x. We'll keep an x with both of these. We have x squared at the beginning. We have a positive 16 at the end. Those do not change. Okay, so now that we've broken this into two parts, or we split the middle, you can see that we have two parts to this. We have the first half with the terms x squared and minus 2x. The second half, we have negative 8x plus 16. This is where we factor by grouping. So we break it up into two halves. We now ask ourselves what we can bring away from the first half. We see they both have an x. So we know we can do that. There's no number here other than 1, so there's no number we'll divide by. And so x as it is, we bring out an x and we ask ourselves, what do we get when we divide? If you have x to the second and you take x to the first away, you'll still have an x here, just 1. And then negative 2x divided by x, you lose the x, and you still have the negative 2. In the second half, we have negative 8x plus 16. When we divide, we notice that we can divide 8 and 16 by an 8. But we've talked about if the starting term of the half starts with a negative, we're going to divide by a negative. In this case, that's going to make what we get match what we got from the first half. So since we start with a negative number, we're going to divide by a negative number. If we divide by negative 8, we can see what happens here. A negative 8x divided by a negative 8 gives us a positive result of 1x. And a positive 16 divided by a negative 8 gives us a result of negative 2. And remember, we want these two sets of parentheses to match. So we've got x minus 2 in both of these places, meaning at the end here, we're going to bring out this x minus 2. And then the second factor that we get is formed by bringing out x and a minus 8 from the two halves that we had before. And those are the two factors. Our factors are going to be binomial factors where we have two terms in each set of parentheses. Okay, let's keep going. It's very repetitive. You notice the setup's the same. We just have new numbers. So let's take a look here. The values of a, b, and c again. We have 2m squared minus 13m minus 24. So a is 2, b is negative 13, c is negative 24. So we've got those. We'll use them in the exact same way again. In our chart, we're going to calculate a times c. And we need to look at our numbers. For a, that was a positive 2. But for c, that's a negative 24. And 2 times negative 24 is negative 48. At the bottom of this chart, that's our value for b. And for b, we have a negative 13. Okay, so we have negative 48 that we need to multiply to. Negative 13 we need to add to. We're gonna talk about what values can multiply to a 48. So we have 1 and 48. There's an option. We have 2 and 24. 3 and 16 multiplied to 48. 4 and 12 multiplied to 48. Or we have the options of 6 and 8. Okay, so those are our integer values that can multiply to 48. We want to multiply to a negative 48. And since we're going to multiply to a negative 48, that means one of our numbers needs to be a negative. So it's either the first row here needs to be negatives or the second column needs to be negatives. A context clue we can look at is right here. Our bottom value is negative. If that's going to happen, that means when you use these two numbers to multiply to negative 48, if they're going to add to this negative 13, that means that the bigger number was negative. So we're going to have negative as the larger value here. Now that we've established that we have one positive and one negative value, let's look at which set. All of these multiply to a negative 48, but out of these options, which ones adds to a negative 13? And the only option is right here. A positive 3 and a negative 16. All right. So now we've found these two numbers, which can take some work, everybody. Don't feel bad if it takes you a little while. Now we found the two numbers we need. They multiply to the negative 48 and they add to the negative 13. We go back to the beginning, rewriting. We have 2m squared minus 13m. Here we go. 2m squared minus 13m minus 24. We are going to split the middle with the two numbers we just said. So on the left and the right of our chart, we have a positive 3. So I'll put a plus for positive and a negative 16. And we keep the letter from the middle term. So we're going to put a letter m. At the beginning, we have 2m squared. At the end, we have a negative 24. Those don't change. We just split the middle part up. Okay, so now we have our four terms again. We're going to group them. Let's bring out a little from each half. So let's bring out a variable here, a variable m. There's nothing we can divide by here other than 1. So we'll bring out m, and so we get m times. Once we take an m away, we have 2m to the second. We're taking away m to the first. We'll still have the 2, but m to the second, take away m to the first, we only have an m remaining. Plus 3m, take away an m, that's plus 3. Second half, here we go. Notice that the second half starts with a negative. We're going to divide by a negative. Looking at 16 and 24, 8 goes into each of these, so we will divide by a negative 8. When we divide by negative 8, we see that we get negative 16 divided by negative 8 gives us a positive 2m. Negative 24 divided by negative 8 is a positive 3. And a good thing happened again. Here we see it. We have 2m plus 3 and 2m plus 3. So for our final factors, the first factor here, we have a 2m plus 3. For the other factor, we look at our common values that we brought out. And from the first half, we brought out a value of m, and the second half, a negative 8. And there are the two binomial factors we need. Okay. So one last one. We've seen some negative places. This one had a minus in the middle and at the end. The one before had a minus in the middle and a plus at the end. The very first one had all plus signs. So what about here in 2a squared minus 3a plus 9? And actually, I just remembered I have a typo here, so I'm going to fix this one. Let's try it one more time. We have negative 9 here. Okay, and actually, I was going to put a positive 3. Let's try this one. 2a squared plus 3a minus 9. Let's change this one around so that we have a different variation rather than what we've seen already. So this one has a plus in the middle and a minus at the end. Now that I've changed it, so let's take a look. We have a and b and c. A is 2, b is 3, c is negative 9. And let's take a look at what we get in our chart. So one more time, we take a times c. A is 2. We updated c to be a negative 9. And 2 times negative 9 is negative 18. In our bottom section of this chart, we have the value of b, which is just positive 3. And so we go to the top. We ask ourselves, how do we multiply to an 18? Okay, so that could be 1 and 18. It could be 2 and 9, or it could be 3 and 6. We want to multiply to a negative 18. Okay, so we recognize that. We need a negative 18. And we want the combined value to be a positive 3. This time, unlike before, that means we want the middle term to be, the bigger term to be positive so that we get this positive answer in the bottom when we combine. So we're going to let the big number be the positive and the small number be the negative this time. So we have negative 1 and 18, negative 2 and 9, and negative 3 and 6 as our options. If you look at the last case, we have a negative 3 and a positive 6. Those are the two numbers we want because those two values multiply negative 18 and combine to a positive 3. Let's go back to the original. We have 2a squared plus 3a minus 9. We're going to split the middle here. Okay, so let's take our middle term, that 3a, break it into two parts. That would be a negative 18a. And, I was looking in the wrong places. That's what I get for not highlighting. My mistake. Look again. Here, we have negative 3 on the left, a positive 6 on the right. So let's try that one more time. We have negative 3a and positive 6a. So we're using the values on the left and the right. We keep the variable. At the beginning, we have 2a to the second. At the end, we have a negative 9. Okay, so we keep the first and the last the same. We split the middle, and here we go. We've got the middle piece. we'll draw a line down the middle, look at each half at a time. So first half, we look, can't divide the two numbers by anything other than 1. However, there is a variable that we can bring out. So we have a. So we'll factor out an a, and then that leaves us with here remaining 2a squared divided by a. You take an a to the first away from a to the second, and we have 2a. After that, we have negative 3a divided by a. So we'll still have the negative 3, and the a's will cancel. They reduce. Second half, let's see what happens. This time, the half started with a positive. So we get to divide by a positive number again. So we're going to divide 6 and 9. Those could be divided by 3. That's the most we can divide them by. The 9 doesn't have a variable, so we're just going to divide by a 3, and we're dividing by a positive 3. Don't forget that. So you do want to write a plus down here, plus 3. And that's going to give us 3a minus 3. All right. So we look at our two halves. That's why they don't match, do they? I just realized right here, I made a mistake. This set of parentheses didn't match that one, so it's good I was checking. Go back and check my work, and it's going to be okay. 6 divided by 3, that's 2. Now we've got it, and so we can now see that these parentheses match. So we are ready to continue factoring. Our first factor is that 2a minus 3 that we have already. And then the second factor one more time. It's the same over and over again. We have an a and a plus 3. And there's our two binomial factors. So that is all the scenarios that can happen as far as what symbols you'll see with plus signs and minus signs. So we'll use this as a guide to look at what your symbols look like. That should help you figure out whether you need two positive numbers, two negative numbers, or one of each. Maybe you can look here again. If b is positive while that top number is negative, we see that the bigger number to the side needs to be positive while the smaller is negative. Up here, it was reversed. We had a negative number up top, but the bottom number was also negative, so the bigger number was negative. All right, good luck, and don't ever be afraid to ask for help.